But you know what's gets me is that in spite of the numbers and the statistics and the fact that it's probably grossly still underreported, people still want to act like when it happens, it's an aberration. And the numbers should tell them it is not. I am sure that I am living on a block with a child molester. There's a child on this block who is being
If it's
molested.
1 in 3 girls, then it's either 1 in 3 men or it's more. Because I don't know about you, but it happened by several men to me.
Yes, it's well, and I always wondered about that because I know that once as a child, I don't know, I know the younger it occurs, the more profoundly it becomes entrenched that you don't have boundaries. Someone else gets to set your boundaries for you. As you grow older, it makes you a perfect target. And I think these are great for picking out the girls who they know they can groom more easily because as a child, I did not understand. I didn't know what a boundary was till I was in my 30s. I was just like, what are those? You mean I get to say what happens to me? What does you mean I can like say no and that's okay? I don't have to be mad about it. I don't have to be, I can just feel like, no, this is my boundary. That was so revolutionary to me. But I think that but there it is it's so prevalent but people still go about their daily lives like it's not a big deal. Like it's not happening all around them. And children don't know how to talk about it, and as adults we have gone so far down the road of shaming victims that you're not even allowed to say I'm a victim. I have to be a survivor. I'm so tired of being shamed because somebody did something to me that made me a victim. I am a victim. It happened to me. It left a permanent mark upon me. I have survived it because while I was a victim, I figured out how to survive. But I am tired of not being able to say I'm a victim. I'm a victim. I'm just going to keep saying it till people stop being shocked by it, because there are a lot of us who were victims who don't survive. We don't make it. We either are killed by our abusers or we take our own lives because it is too much, because they leave us with nothing. And how do we honor those victims if we won't say that we ourselves were victims and we managed to survive? I'm sick of it.
I think
So people, I get the whole, well, don't think like a victim. And when I didn't know how to be anything else but a victim, it was true. I didn't have boundaries. I didn't know how to protect myself. I didn't know how to make decisions for myself. I always felt like I was, it was always someone else in control of my life, and I wasn't allowed to be in control of my life. And that was not good for me. But it was where I was because of where someone else put me. And figuring out how to get out of that was something I had to do on my own terms in my own time. And I was lucky that I had other people around me who loved me. I had a wonderful father. He was just the best dad ever. And I had good friends and other family members who were very supportive. And all those things helped me. But lots of victims never get that. I've been given so many gifts that allowed me to realize that I could have power, that I did have a right to say what happened to me. But not everyone gets that. And when we say don't be a victim, you're blaming them for being where someone else put them and they haven't found their way through it yet. We need to honor people who are still there and nurture them so that at some point maybe they find a way out. Because being a victim and being in that place where where you don't know your power and you don't believe you have power, that's punishment enough. The rest of us blaming them for that's like, we don't need to heap that on. We need to honor the fact that someone took their power from them, and if they never find their way to reclaim it, they suffer for that. They live that life, and that's enough. That is punishment enough that they still don't deserve because someone else did it. I'm so tired of being a victim. I'm so tired of people can't be a victim. I'm so tired of it. I'm a victim. I'm proud of it. I survived, and I'm grateful for the grace that was laid upon me and got me to be this person that I am. who most of the time I'm okay with.
Yeah, and I think that, like, being coming from the personal development world and all of that stuff, and entering into the personal development world. And I remember when I was sitting in a big auditorium, actually there's a couple of experiences, but one in particular, and it was like, cause and effect, that you cause your own, and you attract your own, blah, blah, blah. And I remember sitting there and I was next to a blind girl, and I remember her saying, turning around to me, and she said, so I made myself blind. And then she did recall actually the car accident where she did go blind. There was something she did want to be blind to, and it did bring that up to her. So what would you say, like, when, I guess, I mean, I know Tony teaches that sort of thing. What do you think of all of that?
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, the whole idea that we're all here to work out something that we chose before we got here, sort of thing, maybe. But then what's the point of having compassion? What's the point of the empathy? If we're all here getting exactly what we want, then why do I have to feel bad about anything? So I think it's a silly question, not your question, but I think it's an issue that is sort of a red herring. What kind of person do you want to be? Do you want to be the kind of person that says, oh, yeah, it's a tragedy that you were raped, but you kind of wanted it because you drew that into your life? I mean, is that really what we're going to be about? Maybe it is all something about we're all here to experience this thing, but at the same time, we don't live in a vacuum. We don't exist here in a vacuum. We're all connected. And if someone experiences a tragedy and that was what they wanted to experience, then you have to ask yourself, do I want to experience indifference or do I want to experience compassion? And what did I come here to do? So I choose compassion. I choose to not blame people for their misfortunes by saying to them, whether it's true or not, at some level that I couldn't possibly know, that they wanted that. Then I wanted to be here for them and say, that's awful, because it is. So, I don't get usefulness of that lesson, and I think it's kind of cruel. I really do.
Yeah, and I think
it denies our humanity.
Like, I was watching Tony with you, and I thought, I know exactly what you mean. When you're a victim, like for 32 years, I was a victim. And people used to say, how can you be so unlucky? I mean, even my dog was raped. That sounds terrible. It's really hard for me to even voice it. It's really hard. I did end up putting it in my book. But, I mean, well, that just took me off track then, because I just imagined my dog again.
I'm sorry.
It is, and I forget where I was going with that one, but victim. And I think that there's the victim in situations, but I think that the victim mentality, difference between a victim and victim mentality, I think that some people mean is that somebody, let's say they use it in a different way, like they'll say, this week a car pulled out in front of me, so how dare they, they weren't just kind of using it as a daily excuse to they don't use it for the real times they were a victim, they use it just, do you think that that's more what he meant?
Well, it might be what he meant, but I just disagree with that. I'm sorry, my cat's getting in here to bother me. I disagree that that's the victim mentality. I think that's being a victim means that someone at some point made it absolutely clear to you that there is a limit to how much control you can maintain over what happens to you. And a lot of people never experience that. So you can be a victim of a car crash, right? And like I was, when I was 13, I got hit by a car. I was crossing the street, guy ran me over. And I still have a little bit of PTSD from traffic. my brain learned that, you really need to pay attention to cars because if you don't, they will run you over. Um, but and so, I can cope with that. That's not really a big problem because I can control when I'm around cars that I'm paying attention, and I'm around traffic, I'm paying attention. But with people, it's a it's it's a quandary because we need people. We cannot live without social interaction. We are social creatures. So we must be able to interact with people. And then we have to choose those people. And once you are attacked by someone that you know and that you trust, then the fact that you learn that you can't really ever trust anyone, and that makes you a victim because you can't ever really reclaim that ignorance, because before you believed you could trust them. I just don't think we should. That's not the same thing as people who don't want to be held accountable. They don't want to accept the consequences of the choices they make in
So
life.
do you
And I
think
think
maybe it's just a mislabeling? Do you think maybe it's
yeah,
mislabeling?
people mix it all together. People collapse those two things together, and I think they're very different. I
Okay.
certainly know what it's like not to want to face the consequences of choices I've made, and I can be quite, bratty about it when I'm, just not really willing to accept it. I don't
What would you
think
call
that has
that? What would you call that? Just I'm curious. What would you call that? Where, let's say, Tony Robbins or somebody might, or might call that in the personal development world. They call that victim mentality. What do you call it?
Oh, I guess it depends on the context. I think sometimes it's about entitlement and feeling like we're not getting something we're entitled to. So we're getting something different than what we think we're entitled to. So we have a fit about it. I think sometimes it's about just not wanting to be accountable. We want what we want, and we don't want to face the consequences of the choices we make. And that also is not the victim mentality. That just isn't. But they all get lumped together.
I think so. I think so. And I think what you're coming out and saying, and I think it's fresh, it's refreshing, because a victim is a victim, and we've taken that word very loosely. We loosely have used it in the personal development world by putting it with hood, victimhood, as if it's a crime that you now, yeah.
We've made it an epithet. It is something that you label someone with to shame them. It's a shaming word. When I was on Megyn Kelly, I don't know if you know her. She's a big personality here. She was moderated the debates during our last election.
And do you know what? I think that this is a big message from you right here, right now, because victim and victimhood, because the entire personal development world, a lot of them are standing by Tony because of that one word, because it's a typical NLP and typical in the personal development world, which, let's face it, it's very masculine, and they probably haven't experienced being a true victim, and I know myself being trained by them the way I was using that word. So you've really brought it into my awareness that to be very careful of how I use that word victim, and that I change that word, because it is true. And I felt the frustration when I was an actual victim, that why wouldn't anybody hear me? And then to have that victimhood, I can see exactly what you mean. And I am definitely guilty of having used that word myself out of
context. I've
Yeah.
done it too. And that's when I realized that at some point I realized, I have to always say, oh, I'm not a victim, I'm a survivor. Because when I say I'm a victim, I get all this, sneery, shamey stuff. And, but I realized that if I cannot, so years ago, I had an excellent therapist who tried to get me to sort of talk about my abuse as a child so that I could heal the child. And I just wasn't willing to do it. And I realized, because I hated that part of me that was unable to protect myself, because I was looking at her as an adult, looking at myself with all that judgment of an adult. And I couldn't accept that part of myself, because I was so ashamed, because everybody made out like being a victim was was my fault, and that I shouldn't be a victim. And I finally realized I have to be willing to accept that I was a victim. I have to embrace that part of me and stop being ashamed of it. And that was huge for me. And I think, honestly, that's what got me to stand up in there, was Tony Robbins was taking the Me Too movement, which meant so much to me, and was turning it into being about victimhood, a word I hate. And it was like he was taking this thing that had become so important to me, and he was like wrestling it away from me. And I was like, no, I'm not giving this up. You can't have it.
And I think that's, yeah, and I'm really liking this. I feel like this is the real value in talking to you, is around this, because it's the personal development world. It's massive. It's a massive industry. And that word, it's, it's
Everywhere.
I feel you're right. I feel like it's the wrong word. I feel like, yeah, entitlement and just being I don't know how to put it. Like, I've seen people where they're always sick because they just want somebody to visit them, and that's so that they claim they're sick, and that sort of thing. No worries, bye.
That's being manipulative.
Yeah.
Passive aggressive and manipulative, because for whatever reasons they're afraid to ask for what they want, so they have to try to make people give them what they want without asking for it. There are a million ways to describe behavior that we otherwise lump into being a victim. And I'm not saying that those behaviors don't create pain for the individual who practices them. I just want us to use a different word, because victim should be reserved for victims and honored, because and the shame belongs to the person that victimized them. So, and that's another word that's been just used as a stick, is oh, you just want to be victimized. You can't. I'm just Victim needs to be preserved for what it means, and that means someone harmed you against your will and took your sense of security and safety away from you. And once that's taken, it's not like you can just say, okay, I'll have it back now, thank you. It's like you can't unknow it. You can't unremember it. Even if you can forget the incident, you remember the loss of power and the loss of self-determination. You remember it.
You're a big message right now. I can just feel it going right through me, that a little part that's been missing, and I think that not being able to claim that victim is a part of the problem, isn't it? Because I was so abused, so my children, myself, my mother was abused. That's why she said it's just what men do, because that's what her mum said to her. By never ever being allowed to claim that, it's like you're denying that you have 5 toes and saying, well, apparently society only accepts 3 now, so I have to say I've got 3 and pretend the other 2 don't exist, isn't it? It's a bit like that.
It is. It's like denying a part of yourself that that needs to be embraced and nurtured, because I have to say, I know everyone's different, and the abuse we suffer is different, and I've said this twice now, and it still resonates with me, is that the way that pain blossoms in each of us, the injury, harm, the pain itself is in the same place. It's rooted in the same place, because they take a part of you and they crush it, or they rip it out of you. And healing that, to be whole and to be complete, you have to heal it. And in order to heal it, you have to acknowledge that it was taken. It was crushed. It was hurt. You know, we all are so about being powerful women, and you were clearly a powerful woman. You've gone through so much, and here you are, completely put together and focused on helping, and you're living, you've raised a family, you have grandchildren, you've done all this stuff, and it's still not enough, is it? We never want to feel vulnerable, because that means we're a failure. We're admitting that we were once so vulnerable that someone was able to hurt us. So I've been a strong woman. I am a strong woman, but I am working on allowing the part of me that was victimized and still hurt, is still injured. I'm allowing it to peek out occasionally these days.
And you know what? And I think, you know what? I think that although, you know, really here you've become such a role model of strength and grace, and how it can happen, and you know how you really can stand up and you know, against the Goliaths of the world. I think that the biggest message is right here, and that is that victimhood versus victim, that the wording and people in the personal development world, which is a very big world, and using that word, if we can get them to stop using that word, I am now going to stop using that word. Wherever I use it, I am going to stop. That is my commitment, and I will put it to what it really is. And it really is, trying to think, it's entitled to getting attention, that, you know, it's a separate thing to being a victim. A victim is when someone else or someone has actually hurt you and took your power away, and that you're allowed to have that word.
Yes, let's have that word for ourselves. And the stuff that comes with all, you know, I was abused as a child. My mother suffered with mental illness, and so she was quite violent. And you know, there's a million things that happen to us and that we carry with us that leaves a mark. So we can have a lot of destructive coping mechanisms. Let's stop lumping them all into, you know, victimhood. But I really appreciate that, because that is, I think, become, you know, it's funny, I've given interviews, and because they're television interviews, they take little snippets that they want, and that part never makes it in. That part where I say I'm tired of being shamed for being a victim, it never makes it in there. So, I I've gotten lots of pushback, even from people who are very supportive, and I hear them qualifying when I say back to them, well, it's not, I don't have a problem being a victim. I was a victim. There's a part of me that is still a victim because it's still hurt and injured. I've never quite healed it. And I'm okay with it. And I could hear them like, oh, no, don't say that word. Don't say that word. You know, don't do that. And I want them, I'm sorry to drop it. I really want that these good people who have the best of intentions to sort of start listening and hearing the harm that they're doing inadvertently by shaming victims without meaning to. I know they don't mean to, but it is, that's what we're doing. And I've done it. I have done it. I've done it to myself, and I've done it to others. So I'm not saying I'm above it all. I'm just saying I got to a point where I realized it's not good. It's not healthy.
And I think too, like with Creatrix, when we have a woman come in and she's had horrible things done to her, and she does actually get these lessons around victims. She actually gets, because they get their own wisdom comes through, that they don't see themselves in that role anymore after they've healed it. That's, you know.
Great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think obviously being victimized leaves marks, and if it's from childhood sexual abuse, you cope, and it isn't stopped, and so many, you know, like you and like me, it just went on and on for years, and so it just gets, the coping mechanisms and the internalization just gets more and more entrenched. So yeah, there are a lot of things that you learn how to cope that become very destructive as an adult, and you need, and it helps. It's, your life is better if you can address those and overcome them. Yeah, all of that's true. I'm not advocating that people stay hurt and harmed and injured. I'm just saying let's not use that word the way we have been. And so I absolutely just want us to, that was what, that I really do think that's what made me stand up with Tony, was he was just calling me to about victimhood, and I just couldn't take it.
Well, I'm going to leave it in this video. I'm going to leave it in this interview because I think that you definitely have a right to be heard. And I think your message could slightly be mistaken in the personal development around that word. And I think that they need to understand what you mean, and as well.
Right. No. Yes. We're using the word to the same means something different, and that does create a bit of a that sort of dissonance. But I think that I'm going to figure out how to say it better over time. I'm going to keep saying it till I get it better and people will understand it better, and maybe we can make a change, you and I.
That's it. We will make a change. We are right now, because you don't know who's going to watch this video, and it takes just, if I have my way, the people who need this will see this.
Absolutely, definitely. And that's why the discussion is so important to me, is you never know what you say that is the very thing that someone needs to hear. It might just be one sentence. And so discussion is always great, because everybody is looking for something, and maybe you say it, you spark their curiosity, you plant a seed. I'm always saying that. You plant seed. Might not take right away, but it's there.
I know. Well, I want to thank you so much, Nanine, for your time. You've been really generous with your time, and thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your experience, and your time, I know, is very precious, and so thank you very much.
I absolutely enjoyed it. Thank you so much for the conversation. It was so much fun.